welcome to everyone who has joined us here today. Thank you very much. As we approach the end of the funding period, the initial funding period for the TAEDA Tech Project, we thought it'd be a good idea to share some of our results with you. And to that end, I will be momentarily introducing my colleague and project lead, Zoe Harris, who will be taking us through some of the project findings, where you can learn more about what we've been up to and what we've found out along the way. So Zoe, if you're ready, I'm quite happy to hand over to you for sure.
Perfect, thank you. So welcome everybody. It's fantastic to have you all here. I will share my screen, hopefully with great success. Yes, welcome. We are the TAEDA Tech Project. My name is Zoe Harris. I'm the Director of the Centre for Environment and Sustainability here at the University of Surrey, and I lead on this project along with an absolutely awesome team of people, many of whom are in the room today, and we're going to be talking to you about what we found throughout our project. Slides fall, sorry, there we go. So this project was funded by the UK government, so the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, as part of the Biomass Feedstock Innovation Programme. And this was all about encouraging innovation within the biomass sector to help increase production of sustainable biomass feedstocks in the UK. Our project is fairly large and diverse, so we have a number of key partners. We have ourselves here at the University of Surrey. We have UK Urban Agritech, where Mark is from, and they are one of our kind of core collaborators, as well as a number of both research and industry institutes who we work alongside. So let's dive straight in. So this is an introduction to the TAEDA Tech Project. So what are we doing? We're growing woody crops using aeroponics. So what we're looking to do through this project is understand if we can use a novel type of technology to grow maybe an unconventional plant in an unconventional way, just to see essentially how we can accelerate that transition towards net zero. And the rationale behind this, because often I say this and people think I'm crazy, the rationale behind this is all about our environment and the world we live in. So everybody, I'm sure, is aware that we have this incredible need to reduce our impact on the earth, and mainly that is through the things which we emit, anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. So this slide here is just a quick snippet from one of the IPCC reports, so the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, who synthesize all of this data. And essentially what we're seeing through these global modelling efforts is that in order to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to a safe point in which we won't have extensive amounts of warming, we have to not only reduce our emissions, but end up in this net negative. So this blue line at the bottom is essentially where we need to go. And the way that we've made this line possible, or the IPCC have made this line possible, is through using something called bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. So this technology is absolutely essential. The growing of biomass, using it to replace fossil fuels, and then storing that carbon underground or in the ocean for kind of long-term storage. So if we're going to have this huge task ahead of us, if we're going to increase our land area, how are we going to do that, and how much do we need? So based on these estimates, this is what we're looking at in terms of land. So if we expanded the bioenergy sector to an extent that would allow us to meet these targets, we're talking a land mass somewhere between the size of Argentina and Australia. And we currently have a land mass about the size of Egypt. So we absolutely have a real challenge ahead of us. So why willow? So we know that we have to reduce our emissions. We know that we have to use we know that one of our options is bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. And we know that we need somewhere between 3 and 7 times the amount of land. For the UK, that number translates broadly into about 720,000 hectares by 2050. And we currently have 20,000 hectares. So the problem we've got ahead of us is these huge ambitions to, innovate in our energy system, reduce our emissions and our impact on the environment, whilst the challenge of how we do that in a way that is sustainable and that aligns with the ways that we want to use land, because obviously it's not just available to us for bioenergy. There are lots of conflicting uses and needs and demands on that land. So if we were to try and hit that target, we've identified that scaling up rapidly is impossible. We don't have the stock here in the UK, and since the exit from the EU, importing those feedstocks is incredibly difficult. So that's how we ended up where we are in the TAEDA Tech Project. And so our proposition to try and solve this challenge is a technology called aeroponics. This is a closed loop system where you have a reservoir containing a nutrient solution, so water and fertilizer, that using a pump pumps the water at high pressure down some piping into a growth chamber where the roots of the plant are directly misted. Anything that's not used or taken up by the plant is then drained back to the reservoir. So we don't have any leakage into the environment. We don't have the impacts, for example, in traditional agriculture through things like runoff and eutrophication. And we're able to give the plants exactly what they need. They only take what they need and make use of it. Aeroponics is a really fantastic way of growing plants. You may have heard of hydroponics or vertical farming, for example. But aeroponics is incredibly fast because you have all of this oxygen in the root zone of the plant. So the plants can grow really, really quickly. And you can see here, and this is a picture in our greenhouse of our systems that we're currently growing. So spoiler, we've managed to do it. We've managed to grow these plants really effectively. So we're working across two environments. We're working across a glass house and a polytunnel environment. And the rationale for this is trying to understand commercially what a farmer would do. Our whole project has been built around creating something for, with impact. We're not just doing research here. We're trying to understand what type of system will work and what are the costs and impacts associated with that. So we have a glass house and a polytunnel. We are also using a suite of different genotypes, so different types of willow, which are grown typically for bioenergy. We started with 5, now we're using 10, and we're essentially growing it up and seeing how it performs. So you can see here, we've got 7 days, 11 weeks, and then 18 weeks. In the 18 weeks, this is our project manager, Simona, and you can see them absolutely towering over her. So, the initial proof of concept, does it work, is absolutely yes. But what we're proposing is not to grow trees forever in this system. We want to be really clear that the proposition on the table from TAEDA is about the nursery phase. So growing the trees so that we can generate cuttings. This is how willow is propagated in the field. We grow them up, we cut them down, they become these cuttings, and then they ultimately go into the field. Once they are in the field, they'll then be able to be used for bioenergy production, which allows us not only to have benefits within the landscape. For example, willow is great for biodiversity, it's great for soil carbon. It also allows us to offset the use of fossil fuels. So we have that sort of double whammy when we make use of such a crop for such a purpose. So the project was designed with this impact-focused approach, and we tried to be as holistic as possible. So we set out to demonstrate that we can rapidly grow this willow and see essentially, could we produce a superior product? We wanted to understand our environment and how we optimize that. So we use something called digital twinning, which we'll cover later. We also wanted to understand how we do get to market, as well as identify other potential crops. We wanted to understand from a sustainability perspective what those impacts might be. And then finally, as well as the sustainability, what then happens from a socioeconomic perspective? So what benefits or risks could this technology bring to our landscape? So for today in this webinar, I'm going to be going through our work that we've done so far, which covers broadly all of these areas. So overall, what we found, the kind of big summary that we've had out of this project is that we know that we can generate cuttings faster. We can achieve a higher yield on a smaller footprint of land with a greater degree of quality control. So let's go a bit more into detail. So these are our systems. We started off, I don't know whether it's your left or your right, but the sort of big picture with these brown pots, big flower pots. This was our original system. So we started off with a real early system that we developed and has been, as you can see, very, very successful. That's had crops in it since 2022. And then we've developed with some of our collaborators, and one of those key collaborators is a company called Let Us Grow. We've moved the development of this system from being more research scale up to something to be more commercial. So the row at the bottom, you can see there, these are the next iteration of the flower pot version. So we have an area where we can see the roots. We have slightly better sort of framing and sort of logistics of using that system. which at the moment is doesn't make a lot of sense because you have all of these separate buckets. That's quite costly from a sustainability perspective as well as a genuine cost perspective. So we wanted to move more towards this commercial system. So the row at the top, other than the pot, these let us grow systems, these are these long gantries which we've developed because this is much more likely to be used in a genuine operation by a farmer. So we've developed this technology as well as testing how the plants are performing in terms of their physiology. And so what have we been doing? We've been doing a lot. Apologies, this is a slightly wordy slide. But the key takeaways from this is that over the course of this project, we have started with few systems. We've really developed, we've really innovated those systems, and we've massively expanded our trials and operations over the years. So we've moved from 200 plants in 2022 to almost 900 in 2024 across a number of different systems, environments, and genotypes. So we're trying to see as far as possible how this technology performs for our species in a number of different configurations. And we're collecting a wealth of data. So all of this physiological biomass data, we're also doing biochemical composition, as well as capturing lots of data around the environment that the plants are experiencing. So our key findings were at a really critical point in our project now, where we are doing all the data analysis, so everything's coming together. But overall, what we found is that we can produce a much higher number of cuttings. So the image below demonstrates this wonderfully. So 1 hectare of traditional field multiplication would allow us to have 26 hectares of bioenergy fields. Our aeroponic system, if operated on the same scale, would give us over 200 hectares. So we really are able to produce much, much higher on a much smaller footprint of land. We have noticed some genotypic and environmental differences in performance. And we also notice some other key things in terms of mechanical stimulation. For example, wind produces hardier cuttings. So we're really pleased that we are able to demonstrate that we can create these really hardy cuttings en masse. The next question is, does it work? So we've created all these cuttings, great, but they might not be any good when you put them out in the field. They might be too, pathetic from the fact that they've grown up in this very nice environment. So we've launched a series of field trials all across the UK, again, trying to get that geographical range, trying to have different soil types, for example, and we've been working with some key partners to deliver on this. And these are our findings. Again, we're really, really pleased. We found over 99% field establishment, so the plants were able to grow. We've also found that we have higher yields and bigger plants. So you can see the image there. This is our collaborator and longtime friend, Will McAlpine from Rothamsted Research. So you can see he's absolutely pleased as punch in our aeroponically cultivated trees that are towering over him, and slightly less excited by the conventionally cultivated. So as I say, we're really pleased with this outcome, that we can see this increased yield in the field. So not only can we have more of these cuttings, they seem to actually be performing better than if you do multiply them in the field. So again, from a commercial perspective, from an argument for using our system, we're able to guarantee quality, guarantee establishment, which is really important for farmers who are looking for this crop to provide them with a return over time. We've also done some work on the biochemical makeup of our cuttings. So understanding, why are we seeing this difference? Why are we seeing this superior performance, for example, and how, once the plant is cultivated, might it work, or what might it provide in terms of bioenergy content, so that again, it's really competitive when we do go through to make use of that fuel. I won't go into detail on this as we've only just got the results back, so this is just a little teaser. And something else we've been trying to understand, linked to all of this physiological work, is being able to predict the number of cuttings. So we're trying to understand the shape of a willow whip. We're trying to understand how it is growing and see if we're able to model that using computer simulations. And this is just an example where we're trying to use this very sort of direct physiological growth shape and size to inform our outputs. And again, this work is still at quite an early stage, and we're really refining it. The key challenge we have, we started out calling this the cone model. Very quickly, we realized they're not cones. So actually describing this shape is an incredibly challenging task, and that's what we're trying to do with this piece of work. So we understand that this is that we're able to generate more cuttings. So next we have to get on to how can we make better decisions? So how can we inform our practice using things like data? And this is where we get on to digital twin modeling. So this is hopefully very basic science for everybody, but we know that plants grow using light and carbon dioxide, and the temperature affects them. They ultimately turn all of those factors into biomass. So what this model is trying to do is predict and relate and demonstrate that. So the digital twin is all about creating a computer version of a real life system. And this was done in two ways. So this was done by Yuchin. You can see here her picture, where we took two different approaches. First is understanding photosynthesis. Given photosynthesis drives biomass, the more photosynthesis a plant undertakes, the more biomass it can create, the more weight, the more yield. So what Yuchin did was take a series of photosynthetic measurements over a period of time and create a relationship between the environment that the plants are in and then the photosynthesis that's taking place. And this photosynthetic model is then able to feed in to ultimately predicting what's happening in the plants. What Yuchin and her team also did was look at biomass production. So understanding through time how these plants use that photosynthesis and where they put that energy. So in our system, we had leaves, we had stem, so the woody stem, but we also had the roots. So what Yuchin did was over time harvest these systems on a periodic basis to quantify the biomass. And again, created a modeling simulation to predict that. And as you can see here, this red line is sort of the perfect prediction. And what this tells us is that her model is working pretty well. So we can have a really good relationship between the biomass that's being produced and the data that her model is spitting out. And so what Yuchin ultimately did was put this into what's known as a hybrid model, which is taking both the photosynthesis rate predictive model and the biomass growth model and telling us over time what we might expect from our plants. And again, you can see here from the bottom, this is our prediction over time. And we're pretty happy with this. Yuchin is at the moment trying to use the model to predict our big harvest. So we do these big harvests, all these systems that we grow, we very regularly harvest them. And now Yuchin is in the process of adapting her model to see how we can do those predictions. But this type of model is really useful in an operational perspective, because if we know what temperature the plants grow best at, what environment predictors can tell us, we're able then to modify the environment to ensure that we're able to maximize that output, as well as informing things like when we should harvest the plants for, again, optimal returns. So what else can we do? So I've spoken about Willow. I've spoken about how we can create this simulation, this digital world of our system. But some people might say, well, Willow, that's very specific use. Is there anything else that we can do with these systems? And absolutely yes is the answer. So we've identified that obviously Willow and the biomass energy industry is very specific. There are other sectors that could really benefit from this type of technology. So for example, afforestation, the tree action plan, we need more trees. We have medicinal crop markets as well as plant-based proteins. So what we did as one of our core work packages was understanding where else our system could be helpful. We had a number of core partners, you can see there on the side, and we're trying to understand, how do they perform relative to Willow, because it's, it can be quite a different system. And so what we did as part of this work was we also ran some trials at a much smaller scale with trees for afforestation. So this is a really key thing for the UK. We really need to increase our areas of forests, both from a carbon perspective. So they're great at sucking carbon and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, but they also add loads of benefits in terms of things like biodiversity, but as well as things like cultural enrichment. So it's really good for, human well-being, for example. So what we did in this experiment was very similar to what we do with our willow. We started off with a couple of species and we grew them in the aeroponic system, as well as growing them in a potted control. And what you can see again is we see this superior performance. We see that our aeroponic plants are able to grow more quickly over time compared to the soil. And the way that we're trying to understand this in terms of impact is weeks to harvestable size. So the forestry sector will have a specification for these trees. And typically for alder, for example, that might be anywhere from, to get to that size, it might take anywhere from, 1 to 3 to 4 years. What we found in our system is that we can do it much, much quicker. So you can see there down the bottom that we're able to, at least half that time. So again, we're able to demonstrate not only can we do this in willow, but there are lots of other potential applications which are really exciting to look into. So next, the question is it sustainable? So again, being in the field, having soil, we see all of these great benefits of willow. I've told you it's great for biodiversity. So why do we want to bother putting it in these systems where we've got all this plastic and, we're using pumps, we're using electricity? So what we're trying to understand is how, is it sustainable through time? And we use an approach called life cycle assessment. And we're comparing the initial stage, so the production of cuttings, and what that means then for the life cycle of the product. But it's slightly complicated. So if we look at it as is, if we compare willow grown in the field versus willow grown in our system, we find that our system does have a higher impact. So this is global warming potential. This is CO2 emissions. And what we find is that if you compare it essentially like for like, we are more damaging. We are less sustainable than in the field. However, it is more complicated than that. What we have to remember is that by using our system, we are able to get these plants into the ground much quicker. So if we consider that time aspect, we are able to realise those gains much more quickly. So we still see here that there is a slightly higher impact. But if we move to those future impacts, so the fact that we're able to accelerate the production, the fact that we're able to get those trees in the ground sooner, and the fact that we're able to offset the use of the use of fossil fuels much more quickly means that we are able to have greater savings. So this graph is showing if we use just gas, if we used aeroponic willow, and if we use traditional willow. And what we find is that the aeroponic willow is the most effective at reducing our emissions. So in this graph, the lower the line, the better. The fact that we're able to get them into the ground means that we're able to be more sustainable through time. So life cycle assessment is all about understanding the lens through which you look. And of course, if we looked at this at this point in time in this very narrow scope, we might argue that this really isn't worth it. But the gains that we get by accelerating, production in the field and offsetting those greenhouse gas emissions becomes really significant through time. So as well as the sustainability aspect, the other question is what might the wider benefits be? So this is a piece of work again done by a team in our group, which is using something called CGE modelling, Computer General Equilibrium Modelling. And this looks at the UK as an entire system. So it has these different nodules. And what we do is we introduce what's known as a shock. So we introduce our technology and we ask the model to tell us if we were to introduce this technology, what would that mean for things like GDP, for industrial output, even things like exports, imports, and where do those kind of benefits or risks appear? And so this is what we're seeing. We can see that essentially through time, use of the aeroponic technology will benefit the renewable energy sector. So by using our technology, we are able to increase activity in renewable energies. And as the price of biomass, increases through time, the more our technology is able to have an impact. At the moment, the price of biomass is quite low, and that is again something which is perceived in the industry as being a bit of a barrier, because there's not often an economic value to doing the most sustainable thing, to reducing carbon necessarily. But with something like a carbon tax or a carbon pricing, you might see that shift in attitude towards having systems which are far more sustainable because we are able to really quantify that carbon emission. And so what we also find, as well as the kind of renewable sector increasing, we also see benefits on GDP. So what we see is that we have this increase. So as we're using our technology compared to field multiplication, we see that benefit, we see rises in GDP, but that does decline over time. The reason that's happening is because our system is able to consistently supply the market. So as we become more established and we have a culture and a system in which these plants are being used far more regularly, using our technology decreases over time, which is absolutely fine. It's all about getting it out there and having that impact now. The other thing that we see in this graph, so on the right or left, I don't know which is which for you guys can see, but the sort of long line down the side, this is also telling us about other benefits, so the more social benefits that can arise. So beyond GDP, things like social welfare, things like job creation, things like people's ability to live well within the sort of finances they have. We're able to assess with this type of model. And again, what we're seeing here is the impact of our technology. So the little purple circle there is just an example. These are a couple of scenarios which look at using aeroponics in the polytunnel versus aeroponics in the greenhouse, and also the sort of orangey color is the multiplication bed. And again, what we see is when we use our technology, we see wider benefits on the socioeconomic system. So we're really seeing these gains through time. Not only are we able to produce far more quickly in a way that's more sustainable, but we're also able to see benefits to wider society from making use of this technology. So what's next? We've reached a point now, as I mentioned, we started in 2022. We're now coming up towards the end of our project, or at least this pot of funding at least. And we're trying to understand where we are. We know that we have been able to produce, as I say, far more on a smaller footprint of land. We're really pleased with our ability to demonstrate the sustainability credentials as well as the socioeconomic impacts of using our technology. But we're now thinking, how do we move forward? So one of the core things we're trying to do is obviously influence policy. Increasing the biomass sector generally is incredibly important for meeting those targets. Bioenergy with carbon capture and storage will be essential for our future, no matter how you get it. So whether it's with our technology or not, we really need to grow that sector, and demonstrating how that has benefit is really, really important. So obviously influencing policy is a real key aim that we'd like to achieve through this project. But we're also keen to think beyond. So we've developed this technology, we've got some great partners. We want to understand what other crops we might be able to grow, how we might be able to help other sectors, and also how data-driven modeling can help us make better decisions, not only in our system, but for other systems potentially. So, I'd really like to, make an open call to everybody who's here that we really actively invite collaborations. If you've seen something today which has, spurned an interest, and, you're really keen to get involved or ask us about, why we're doing that, please do reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Just to reiterate that again, so please do get in touch. We have our email address there. Otherwise, you're welcome to get in touch with any one of us. We do have a website. I'll say thank you, and I'll go into the final slide. So we do have a website, which is taedatechnologies.com, I believe. If you Google us, you should be able to find us. Additionally, we are on socials. We are LinkedIn and also on X, so we'd love for you to follow us. And what I would also like to say is that this is sort of planned as our kind of end of project webinar. But what we'd love to do is showcase in a bit more detail what everybody is doing. We have an absolutely fantastic team made up of wonderful people, researchers, scientists, and people who work in industry. And we'd really like to be able to showcase their work in much more detail. In this brief half-an-hour webinar, I really can't do justice to their work and the detail and the nuance that goes into it. So what we'd like to do is in the next few months, we'll be having an upcoming webinar series where we'll have a similar lunchtime slot. Similarly, quite short presentations from each member of our team, where they're really going to go into detail of how we got to where we wanted. In preparing for this webinar, I had to ask lots of questions about very complicated graphs, and I would really like them to be able to shine and demonstrate, the work they've done, and for them to have a platform to talk to you guys as well. So if you're interested in those webinars, again, follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter, get in touch with us, and we'll make sure that when we do go live with those webinars, we'll make sure you get an invite. So that's my last slide. I will stop sharing, but would like to say thank you so much for listening. I really do appreciate that. Hopefully it wasn't too quick a whistle-stop tour of everything we've done. But Mark, can I hand back over to you for?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
For those of you who are attendees here, obviously, I think I did put a note in the chat, but If you want to ask any questions, now is the time. Do plonk them into the Q&A function that's up in the top. We do have one in there currently, which I will ask in a minute, but I'm going to sneak in there first, if I may, just to ask you a question, Zoe, which is just in terms of you sort of briefly talked about the impacts, sort of LCA. Whilst the impacts of other crops, because you talked about some of the other crops are obviously going to be different in that every crop is going to be different. Do you think that is that approach applicable regardless of the crop type? Would we expect to see similar sorts of results? And is it a fair comparison to then do other crops in a similar way?
Do you mean the approach to growing, or do you mean specifically the sustainability assessment?
Well, either, to be honest, but yeah, okay. Just particularly in terms of the impacts, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of the other crops piece, I think I'd be really minded to say that just because we can doesn't mean we should. So there are crops that are more or less appropriate to grow in this system. Obviously, growing willow, we very quickly get people who maybe are quite impassioned about why we shouldn't grow trees this way. But that's why I'm very careful to say actually it's for multiplication. And by doing that, we really do see these benefits through time. So I sort of say, yeah, initially, we have a whole suite of crops that we could grow. This technology is really applicable to larger crops. So that's, again, one of the drivers for our innovation is the fact that in the market at the moment, most of the technology is for smaller crops, things like lettuces, really, really tiny. But we're looking for a system that can allow us to grow larger crops. So we have that ability. I would say from a sustainability perspective, it depends on your end goal. So obviously for the bioenergy picture, we have a very clear rationale. If we can get it out sooner, we can suck up that carbon quicker. Similarly for forest, if we can again get forest planted more quickly, because in the forestry sector, there's an incredible challenge with not only identifying places to start forest, but also that forestry stock. Because of how long it takes for the nurseries to get the plants to harvestable size, there is a significant investment and time lag. So the great thing about our technology is we can very rapidly crop switch. We don't have to wait 2 years and then go, oh, well, no one's going to buy it now. Or we don't take a contract because we're not sure if someone will buy it at the end. We're able to make those changes very quickly. I think there are areas where you get into maybe a bit of a grey area in terms of sustainability versus output is when you don't have that environmental benefit as neatly laid out. So in terms of sucking in carbon, for example, and this might be something which would be akin to the medicinal crop space. So for medicinal crops, of course, we're not going to necessarily be seeing carbon emissions decreasing. However, you are adding something to society. You are providing a medicine at a cheaper cost, or you're improving the quality of a compound, for example. So I think it becomes a trade-off to kind of what you're operating. But regardless, through our project, we have looked at sustainability, and sustainability has really been at the forefront of what we do. So regardless of what we're doing, we're constantly trying to be more efficient, reducing fertilizer, reducing, the lighting regimes, really limiting as much as we can from the plant's perspective to see those benefits.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think I like this idea that, sustainability is social, economic and environmental, right? Exactly. So with those medicinal crops, you will see the economic and social benefits, even if there's an environmental cost to some extent. So it's about measuring up those trade-offs. Yeah. And we got a couple of questions in the Q&A, so I'll dive into those. Firstly, from Diana Davidson, Drax currently imports Canadian wood pellets from primary forests to power their UK renewable energy plants. Could this be replaced with UK grown willow, which also captures and stores UK carbon emissions?
Yes. So obviously at the moment we import the majority of our pellets. The market in the UK for bioenergy is not as mature and as strong as it could be. So absolutely yes is the answer. We have well, that's a caveated answer maybe. We have the land. There's been lots of work which has shown that we do have the space in the UK. As many of you may know, that there's often a conflict between, food versus fuel. We know for the UK, for example, that we really don't have that problem. We have sufficient land, which is unproductive, low quality, underutilized, that we could grow these types of crops in. We also have really good maps of the expected yields. So in the UK, we use willow, but we also use a crop called miscanthus. Those are our two primary crops here in the UK. And we have really good maps about pardon me, where they grow effectively, where they grow best, and what those yields might be. So absolutely, yes, we could have more production onshore, and I think that was I think the rationale behind this funding body was really to accelerate this sector and see how we could increase UK-based biomass, because as you say, the emissions are kept here onshore. The caveat comes with the kind of business case for that. So it comes, I think, down to cost. It comes down to regulation, and essentially the reliability of supply. So at the moment, there is not, maybe there's not a reliable enough supply in the UK at the scale that would be needed to satiate some of the power plants that are operating now. So without that investment and that development, it will take a long time to essentially replace that overnight.
Okay. Yeah, so Angela says, great presentation, really interesting project, so that's nice. Have you measured the output from the willow you've grown and compared it to conventionally grown willow?
Depends what you mean by output. So yes, if you wanted to add a caveat and specify, you can. Otherwise, I'll keep talking to try and answer it. So we've looked at the biochemical analysis. Will compare the willow to conventionally grown. So we'll understand from a biochemical perspective what the difference is. So do we have a crop that is does it have the same energy density? So when we use it for bioenergy, will it grow? Will it burn the same? When we put it in the ground, will it grow the same? Does it have the right nutritional profile contained within it? So we've looked at the biochemical level. We've looked at the growth in our system. So we have a potted control. So that's our comparison. We also have lots of field data from conventionally grown bioenergy that we can use to compare our yields. And then finally, we've gone out into the field. So we've tested, once it's in the field, how is it then performing? So yes, we've compared them on all of those three sort of layers. And what we are finding consistently is that our approach is more effective. The only one I can't be certain of that yet is the biochemical analysis, because we've not got into the details of that yet. We've only got, I think we got the analysis back last week. So it's a real early teaser.
Watch out for the later webinars on that one then.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of questions from Nelson here. First, I'll do them one at a time. In the air, and again, I would suggest very much, Nelson, that you come along, keep an eye out for our more detailed plant science ones in due course. But in the aeroponic systems, do you use broad spectrum nutrients amounts, or have you achieved an efficient recipe?
Yes, great question. So what we've done in our system is we have developed a bespoke recipe for our plants. So we started off with a very basic standard mix, so something called Hoagland's, which is like a standard sort of scientific mix of nutrients, set number of micronutrients and macronutrients, they're all quantified. And the reason they were developed was so that people like us can make changes to them. So what we've done is we started with the standard Hoagland's, and then we have amended that to really cater it to what our willow want. All plants are different, but we've been able to create a very optimized recipe. In terms of efficiency, it also depends on how you apply it. So we are able to control irrigation in our system, which obviously you wouldn't be able to do in the field. So what we've also worked on is irrigation timing. So during the growth of the plant, depending on the time of the year and the phase and the environment, we have come up with, again, sort of a bit of a recipe or a process which allows us to provide a sufficient amount of nutrients in the most sustainable way. So limiting the amount of time the pump is on. So again, we can make it more sustainable. So we have done that from both angles. Great question.
Okay, nice. Yeah, and one other question from Nelson, would the incorporation, obviously I know the answer to this, but would the incorporation of LEDs in the system for extra PBFD be considered, or is it not worth it?
Again, very good question. So we do have contrasting environments. So our polytunnel does not have anything supplementary. It's just a slightly protected environment, whereas our greenhouse does have supplementary lighting. So what we're seeing is that it does increase growth. But I think we are yet to confirm whether it is worth it or not. I think it's slightly more complicated in terms of those differences in performance. So what we want to understand is the difference in performance grown in the polytunnel versus the glasshouse. And I mentioned that wind is a really important component. So we are finding that our cuttings do come out sort of more hardy from the polytunnel. I think it is we definitely see an increase in yield, but it becomes I think the worth it question is around the sustainability and the economics, and those are two different things. From a sustainability perspective, from the slides I showed, we do see those gains, less so than in the polytunnel without. But from an economics perspective, if there's not the value of the feedstock, then it then becomes a question of whether it is worth it. But we have to, I think, do a bit more work on that to kind of really confirm. And it's also probably slightly subjective as well.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of ifs and buts and maybes in answer to that question.
Yeah.
Another one from Diana here. Have the cuttings been pre-treated in any way before they enter the aeroponic system to speed up regeneration?
Yes, well, not sort of. So the cuttings are normally frozen. So they're frozen at -4 degrees. And then we take them out of the freezer. We let them not deep, what they called, lost my word, unfreeze themselves. What's the word?
Defrost.
Defrost, that's it. So decompose. We let them defrost for 24 hours and then we soak them just in water. Willow's incredibly hardy, so it doesn't need lots of encouragement to get going. So yeah, again, we can do it very low cost, very, very sort of sustainably.
And have we done any other treatments, sort of biostimulants, anything like that?
Oh yes, so we've got a trial at the moment, which I haven't presented here because again we're in very early data collection. But we are looking at the using biostimulants as a pre-treatment. So thank you, Mark, for reminding me. So that's looking to understand essentially, can we further accelerate our process, or can we further increase the productivity and the quality of our cuttings? So we're using a range of different types of biostimulant to see how that might affect the growth of the willow.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll leave it for a moment just to see if any more questions do come in. But yeah, just to remind everyone, this is the first of a series, but also do, as Zoe said, reach out to us, come and talk to us. Some of the people in this room are also some of the people who've worked on the various areas of the project. So yeah, do have a look at people and, reach out and have conversations, because we are very keen for all of this to go forward and to do more as it does so. So yeah, do definitely reach out to us. I don't have any more questions coming in, so I think if we've reached an end point there, that's quite a nice bit of timing for us, and
lovely.
We can wrap it up there. Zoe, thank you so much for heroically taking this on and covering all the different areas of the project. It's remarkable that you managed to keep all of them in mind all at the same time, but thank you very much for doing that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. Lovely to see you all. Look forward to hearing from you. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers now.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.